Calling to order the Planning Commission meeting for March 3rd, 2022. The first item will be a pledge of allegiance. Roll call.
We'll do roll call.
Sorry, Willenbring,
Here.
Stolarski.
Dowalski, Danta, sorry,
Yada.
Yeah,
yeah,
here.
Pearson,
Campbell.
Campbell.
Do we have any motion to amend the agenda?
Yes, sir, we do. If we could move the new business, public hearing for Iglesia Rios de Agua Viva Church up to before the old business, so make it the first item on the agenda.
Second.
All aye?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Sorry, I got twisted. Oh, I'll do the minutes later?
Approval of minutes.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the January 6th public hearing.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Anybody abstain?
Motion.
Does anyone have a change in the minutes?
No.
Okay, and we vote on it to approve,
I'll vote.
to accept.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next one is a new agenda, new item, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll move into the new agenda, new item.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The first item on the agenda of the amended agenda is a conditional use permit, a variance, and site plan approval for a proposed church at 7287 Stillwater Boulevard North. The comprehensive plan designation for this property is low-density residential in the 2040 comprehensive plan. The zoning for the property is R2, low-density residential, and churches are allowed in this district as a conditional use permit. Just remind the Planning Commission that a conditional use is a permitted use to which conditions may be attached based upon findings of the need to mitigate potential adverse impacts. So the property owner has the right to the use. The city has the authority to attach conditions. You have in the planning report the standards that are required to be met in order to grant approval of a conditional use permit in Oakdale. Very quickly summarizing those, that the conditional use is in conformity with the city's comprehensive plan, which it is, that the conditional use shall be located, designated, and maintained and operated to be compatible with the existing or intended character of that zoning district in which it's located, and that is a finding for the Planning Commission to determine in its recommendation. That the conditional use shall not be hazardous, detrimental, or disturbing to present or potential surrounding land uses. And it specifically references noise and glare and smoke and dust and odor, fumes, water pollution, et cetera. Those are the kinds of issues that the city could consider attaching conditions to mitigate if you were to find in the evidence that you review that those conditions could occur. The conditional use shall not create traffic congestion, unsafe access, or parking needs that will cause inconvenience to the adjoining neighbors. That the conditional use will be served adequately with essential public services. That the conditional use shall not create excessive additional requirements at public cost for public facilities. And finally, that the conditional use shall preserve and incorporate the city's natural and scenic features into the development design. So this action tonight requires your consideration of three different motions. One of them is for the conditional use permit. The second one is for the variance. And the variance is required because in order to meet the required parking, they need to have a parking lot that's off premises. So they're proposing to use a parking lot that is 300 feet from the site, and the applicant can talk about how they will manage that. They are negotiating to locate that parking on the lot that's currently Canvas Health, which is 7066 Stillwater Boulevard. So in summary, the planning staff and development review committee has reviewed the application. We believe that the proposed variance has been reviewed and found to be consistent with the official comprehensive plan policies, that it is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance, and that the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner, and that the reason for the variance is due to circumstances that are unique to the property. The third action that you need to take, the third motion, is related to site plan review. And I won't review all of the issues there. You've got the statistics in terms of required parking spaces and the number of seats and the size of the building. All of those statistics have been reviewed, and they're consistent with the city's standards. There's information there about exterior building materials and design, trash handling and landscaping and site lighting, as well as signage and grading and utilities. So, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the recommendation is the staff has determined that the conditional use variance and site plan are consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The staff recommends approval of the request with the following conditions. Approve the variance allowing off-site parking for more than 300 feet from the entrance. Include additional screening around the parking lot to specifically reduce headlight impacts on nearby residential areas and Hamlet Avenue. Adjust the parking aisle that is currently shown as 24.6 feet to 25 feet to meet the parking aisle requirements for 90-degree parking stalls. Provide a copy of the Valley Branch Watershed District permit for those proposed site improvements. Condition number 5, provide a copy of the Washington County Highway Department access and right-of-way permits for these proposed site improvements. There is a proposed emergency access only onto Stillwater Boulevard that has been reviewed and needs to be documented as acceptable by the Washington County Highway Department. And sixth and finally, to provide the geotechnical analysis, including the soil borings for the site to verify that the proposed infiltration rates for runoff in the HydroCAD model are in line with those recommended by the Minnesota Stormwater Manual. So again, Mr. Chairman, this, after discussion and the public hearing, the Planning Commission would be considering 3 motions, one related to the conditional use permit, second related to the variance, and the third related to site plan review. I'm happy to answer any questions. Obviously, Mr. Gitzloff is here as well, as is the city's engineering consultant, Todd Blank.
I'll ask the board if they have any questions at this moment.
I have one for now, and then I've got one later when during the open meeting of the applicant. But in your access, circulation, and parking, item 2B, there's a comment from the fire department. The parking spaces along the access drive to Stillwater must be removed. Question is on the one drawing I'm looking at, C2.1, I'm not sure that it actually shows the area the fire department is asking about. I was just curious if those parking spaces on this drawing are in conformance with what the fire department was asking for.
Well, first, they certainly will be when the final approvals come in. Mr. Gitzloff, are you aware of that? Maybe take that one.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Commissioner, I can address that. Right now, there are shown 6 or 7 parallel parking spots within that emergency egress. That was seen as problematic from our fire chief. So we would recommend that those be removed. I think the issue would be, creating the sense that, once you park there, people are going to want to go out directly forward, or creating conflicts with fire trucks going in. So the request was that be strictly an emergency exit only, and then using a solid surface versus, I think it was more of a turf-type surface proposed as part of that too. You know, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be plowed, so that in an emergency, a fire truck can get in or get out.
So these architectural drawings don't reflect that requirement at this point.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, no, they do not, so that's why the staff has put that in as a condition of approval.
Okay.
I have a question. Page 2 of the report, item 3, this is regarding parking lot screening. Such screening shall be 80% opaque and a maximum height of 3 feet. Is that how code is written, or is that our recommendation?
That is how the code is written. That's the screening requirement.
So, for a different time, but I don't think that's how we quite want it, because by putting that maximum in there, they could, could they theoretically put a 6-inch wall and say, well, that met the definition of the code. It's not 3 feet, or it's not above 3 feet. So we may just want to look at that.
Yeah, you may want to look at that standard. The purpose is clearly to screen headlights.
Right, I think
Which is
it probably
why the
needs to be
standard's
a-
written the way it is.
Yeah, it probably just needs to be a 3-foot. The other thing was, there is a drive aisle. We should just, before we go to council, we should look at these drive aisle widths again, because in the northern part of the lot, one of the aisles is 24, not 25 like our code. So, we just, in addition to the one already called out. And then I have some other questions, but we'll,
Yeah, I'd jump on the maximum height, and I would have thought that it should have been a minimum. That I've read
You don't
right
want it-
past that one.
That might actually have been a typo.
I'm
Most of
guessing
the
it
time.
is, because I can't.
Duly
can't
noted.
imagine- I can't imagine the neighbors would object to it being 6 foot.
Any other questions from the board? Hearing none, at this time, I will open it up to the public.
Do you want the applicant to have an opportunity to address the
Oh.
commission first?
You got it right. At this time, I'll ask the applicant to come forward and provide any comment they may have.
Yeah, they're making me talk. My name is Peter Hill. I'm the architect on the project. We have with us tonight, oh, here he is. This is Pastor Luis Rivera. This is the man behind this whole operation. He's quite the guy. We're looking forward just to being good neighbors, and everything that y'all have talked about tonight, we will absolutely work out with staff. We're not trying to push anything that would offend the neighborhood. We're hoping that the neighbors like us and like this project, and that it's a friendly neighborhood when we're all set up. We did set up an open meeting, an open house back in the first week in February. We invited everyone on our block and on the other side of all the streets around our block. We invited a total of 50 addresses to come and take a look. It was cold out, and we got a very small attendance, but nobody complained. So we're hoping that this is just a happy event, and I'm happy to answer any kind of technical questions or design questions. This guy is going to have to answer the sociological questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, one of the issues about the variance is that it's about 300 feet away, and the discussion has been that would be handled by valet parking. I think it might be useful to understand better how that would work.
You want to speak to that? You do
Yeah,
valet?
we
You do
have-
valet.
We have already valet parking in our old building, because we have a building in East St. Paul. Rios de Agua Viva is a church over 25 years old. In the most of the time, we are working on East St. Paul. And I am pastor of this church for the last 20 years. And we wanted to move over here to Oakdale because we have many people, or many families. They are living in Oakdale. And we used to use a valet parking all the time because for the severe weather, on the east side pole, we don't have parking lot. And we are sharing a parking lot with the east side clinic in the east side. And we have a lot of experience working with valet parking to help the single mothers. They came with their kids, and we help to provide that kind of service to help them.
If I may ask a question?
Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. This is a personal question, not related to the land use, but I did see your video online of your sanctuary, and it's like huge. You're actually moving the entire church operation here?
Yes, sir.
Is it large enough? It looked like there were like closer to 2,000 people in that sanctuary.
No, it's like 1,000 people must be, and now we are celebrating 3 services on Sundays on the actual building, and we work with a lot of youth people, and the most of the time we are celebrating 3 services on Sundays, and our purpose with this building is congregate all people in the same hour and same service.
Excellent.
And that's the main purpose.
Let me point out that what you saw in the video is not the existing church.
Oh, okay.
The existing church seats what, 250?
And like almost 300.
300.
Almost.
So when he has 3 services, that's 3 services for 300 people, and at the end of the day, he goes into a coma. So the idea here is to try and reduce the number of services by expanding the size of the sanctuary.
Okay. I do have one architectural question.
Yeah.
We talked about the fence over by the parking.
Right.
The back end of the sanctuary is going to be abutting the neighborhood, and it's fairly close to the property line. So my question is, what is going to be on the back side of the church? Is it, security lights? What?
Almost nothing.
Okay.
We're not looking to light up the place. I have admonished my electrical engineer that there will be no wall packs on this project. And what we do plan to do, and this is something that the staff report has indicated, is we do plan to do a lot of planting on that east side of the building, so that you're not going to see much of our
So
building.
no noise pollution and no light pollution?
Well,
in
again,
abutting neighborhoods?
no, there's no noise at all on the backside of the building. The backside of the building has 2 minor egresses, but all of the major entries to the building are on the north, south, and west sides of the building, in from the parking lots. So there are 2 entries on the backside of the building, but they're for minor egress and offices. They're not for the congregational, the Sunday service.
I have a question. Are you going to carry any other functions, like weddings or maybe some sort of gathering that are outside the church?
Well, the most of the time we celebrate the weddings.
Okay.
The weddings into the church, yes. So what we do, yeah.
To sort of add on to that, I assume you're going to have activities going on during the week too, besides Sunday service at this place?
The most of the time we celebrate 2 services in the week, Tuesdays and Sundays. That's our plans, and we don't want to change that because our vision of work is working with the single houses. We take the word of God to the persons, and we have 2 services in church. But we are working all week, but in the personal houses, like small groups.
So you go in the community, so to speak,
Yes,
go out to the people.
exactly.
Any other questions? Seeing none,
Any community input?
that's what I'm going.
Okay.
next, Yeah. I would ask at this time to the audience, if they have any comment to make, you can move forward.
My name is Dennis Swanson. Is this thing on? I live on Hayward Avenue. Do you guys got maps of this stuff? So you can see my address, 2652?
I don't believe we've got a neighborhood map, no.
Mike, I got like 3 questions, basically. Start off with an easy one. Is this parking lot gonna have lights in the lot shining into my bedroom window at night? You know, all on every night, lights, or don't you know?
So based on the photometric plan that was included in here, depending on where you live, the foot candles at the property line generally are below half a foot candle.
So nothing
So it will have lights.
Menard-style lights up in the air?
Oh, they're probably 24-foot tall standard parking lot lights, but.
And they're on all night?
Generally, those have down lights and shades, so they shouldn't be shining.
Shooting down.
Hopefully.
They have a shaped pattern so that by
So
the
it doesn't
time,
shoot out?
by the time it gets down to the property line, it's gonna be at a level that's half a foot candle, which,
Okay.
that's like a candle at a half a foot.
Your maps probably doesn't show this, but all the houses on off of Hayward, Hayward's like this, the property's down there, so it's all hill going down. My yard just goes down into that property, what I assume is gonna be the parking lot. Every spring, this time of year, snow melt, rain, my backyard already gets flooded because the water runoff isn't going. It just sits in my backyard, and my shed floats, my deck back there floats. I actually use a sump pump to shoot it down a ways, so. Am I guaranteed that when they put the parking lot in, there's gonna be some kind of a better system of water runoff from our hills?
The one comment I can give you is that while that's a consideration that we have, that's something that the watershed district will address in a separate meeting.
Tell them it's a concern because it's not just my yard that I get water this deep back there, just because
So,
it doesn't want to go back into where the old woods was. When they cut the woods down and they
new
put the
develop-
pine trees in, it kind of built up a berm, created a dam, and now it's just a mess.
So a new development project should have to retain all of that stormwater on site. Treat it on site, keep it on site. It shouldn't be pushed off onto other properties. Now, obviously, I can't guarantee anything, but to Dallas's point, you know, the watershed district would be looking at that.
And then parking, I can't hear, I'm almost totally deaf, but is there gonna be people parking on my street to go to this thing, or?
That's not the intent by their parking plan, no.
Because they would have to walk way around to get to the church.
Just so you know, their parking plan is that they've got X number of spaces on the premises. They are also going to have a bus, their valet service, that's going to run to the facility that's down in the corner.
Yeah, on the corner of Stillwater Road and Hadley.
That's where their overflow parking is going to be, and they'll have a service bringing them to the church.
Okay. My biggest concern is the water situation.
Basically, though, this is just a preliminary drawings that we have here. This is just to get the ball rolling on this thing. And then
These are
These are pretty
fairly-
much it?
These are fairly
Because it
advanced.
says these aren't really, if you look at these are.
Yeah, I mean, these are not construction level drawings.
Right,
They're not
right.
gonna submit these for permitting, but these are fairly well thought through
That's
in
what they're
advance.
gonna be doing.
And they have been reviewed to determine that the wetland will stay and that the conditions as described, there will not be an increase in runoff off the site after it's improved. So they will be engineered drawings and reviewed by the city's engineering department as well as the watershed district.
We brought our civil engineer. Would you like to have him address that
If
question?
he could answer
That would be
to
great.
satisfaction of this gentleman, that would be good.
Is it okay if I stay up here? Because I can't hear back there. I'm bad.
So I can answer the gentleman's question here. So, and if you'd like to, you can.
Your name?
Yes, I'm sorry. My name is Robbie Latta. I'm with Civil Site Group. We're the civil engineer on the project. If you'd like to, you can point up there at
Where my house is?
yeah, where your property is.
I think Hayward's to the north.
So this street right here is Hamlet. North is that way.
So the lots are at the top of the screen.
Hayward is planned north.
So yeah, so Hayward is planned north up in that area.
See where it says modular block retaining wall? Like that?
Yes. Is that your property right
Either
there?
that one or next one over.
Okay, so both of those, maybe I can speak to the
You use the
You
mic.
can use that one right here, probably.
There's one right behind you.
There's a,
Okay. So the way our drainage scheme works is that your hillside comes down and drains towards that the property line, and we'll have catch basins at the edge of that retaining wall.
there you go, yeah. There you go.
We'll have catch basins down along the bottom side of this retaining wall that actually take drainage from this hillside and put it into our underground infiltration systems. So that way we won't have any sort of ponding, other than that which sits in low points in your yard. We won't have any sort of ponding here that's possible.
Right, that's where, that doesn't go past there.
Exactly. So we have catch basins that allow all that drainage in this low point between the wall and the property line to enter into the underground drainage system.
What about the pine trees? Are they staying?
Yeah, the pine trees are staying.
They were gonna cut them down.
Don't throw me under the bus.
Yeah, right.
As long as you're there,
Yeah,
is the entire parking lot gonna be impervious or permeable?
impervious, so asphalt with drainage structures along the curb line.
The runoff from that will go to the catch basins and that's.
Yes, exactly, and then into the underground infiltration systems.
Since we have you here as civil, I guess I'll make my comments about the parking lot.
Yeah.
I am not happy with the way that parking lot is laid out.
Okay.
I think it's inefficient. I think you can probably get at least 20 more parks on there, 15 to 20 somewhere. Right now, I'm not comfortable with the valet option and having to utilize that. So I think there's some opportunity to explore kind of the site layout right now and try and increase, either shrink the footprint in the building to drop that parking requirement, or find ways to get some more stalls on there.
That's certainly something we can take into consideration.
I do want to sort of second your comment, because during inclement weather, I think it'll be sort of challenging to bus people from one site to another site. Summertime may be probably more bearable, but when you have sub-zero temps, it might be a challenge. So any way you can sort of squeeze a little more parking here.
There's no busing. We're not busing anybody.
Oh, I thought you did valet
No, no,
parking.
there's no busing.
No,
We
no.
have
Well, when you say-
valets, that's
What you-
all.
But when you say valet, you have runners that are running from the front door. I took you grabbed somebody's keys, they're running over to the parking lot. That causes me even more concern, because now they've got to run down, what is this road here? What's south of this, Helmo?
Yeah, there actually is a bike path for them to run on.
Right, but to get from the church to Stillwater in the bike path, there's no sidewalk on that road. Then they have to go down the bike path, and they either have to go down all the way to Hadley
Hadley and Stillwater.
and cross at a crosswalk, or they're gonna cross mid-block to get to Canvas, which is on the south side or the north side of Stillwater. To me, it doesn't seem, they're going to, I mapped it out on Google today, they're gonna go a quarter of a mile to make that maneuver.
Yep. They're
Doesn't-
young and strong. The alternative is to
That's-
kill,
that's
the
great,
alternative is
but-
to kill the project or give us a variance for less parking. Those are the only alternatives.
Well, you can reduce the size of the building. You can work on the parking lot to try and get some additional stalls in there. Those are other options.
I'll welcome your map.
My map of,
The parking.
oh, I have it. I did it this morning at work.
Please send it over. I'm serious. Please send it over.
Happy to share it.
there any additional engineering?
We'll check to see anybody in the audience would like to. Would anybody else be a comment to make? You can move forward. Just coming over.
My name is Kenneth Gilmore. I live across the street from Dennis on Hayward Avenue. I'm concerned also about the light because I was concerned when they put in a street light on our street. So that's the kind of concern that I have for light pollution. The second concern that I have is what's happening to the water that comes off that parking lot and how that's going to affect the water tables and other ecological factors in the neighborhood. We've lived in our present home over 50 years and have enjoyed the, by the way, that parking lot that we see there was on very low level before the trees were cut out in an abusive manner. That whole area was soggy, wet, and what happened to all that water that used to be there? I'm concerned about that. The third thing that I'm concerned about is the parking situation. We're talking about overflow parking. That's on the other side of the freeway, on the other side of a busy street, Stillwater Boulevard. You've addressed that.
Any other comment?
Hi, I'm John Dovely. I live at 2632 Hayward. My house is right behind the church. And what I'm concerned is about noise pollution. If they should maybe be putting up a noise barrier wall there, because there's 6, 7, 8 houses there that are going to be right behind the church. So I would like to wanted to bring that to your attention if that would be something that would possibly could be done.
Thank you. Any other comment from the audience?
My name is John Williquit. I live on Hayward. My big question is, I don't know how many parking spots they're going to have for the church. Are they all going to access Granada, or are they going to come around and take Hayward when they leave the church? And we get enough traffic coming up Hayward the way it is. And if you're going to have 300 more people coming up that way, that road shouldn't handle that right the way it is now. So something should look into that. Thank you.
There's no access to Hayward.
Thank you.
There's no access to Hayward.
There is from the south, but it's another small street off from the neighborhood.
Yeah, if they make a left out, they can kind of loop around.
Any other comments?
I guess I'll just, as a side comment, I agree with Chris on the, I wasn't reading the valet parking as truly valet. That would be more of a risk, I think, for the people doing the work than having a bus or something. That's more what I was thinking you were meaning by valet. But
Okay,
it isn't part of the motion, so it's a moot point for now.
okay. Any other comments? Should I give the applicant opportunity to respond?
You can if you wish.
Okay. At this time, I'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond to comments that were made and concerns that were brought up.
So I do have a couple of short responses to some of the comments. I think one of the gentlemen mentioned some ecological concerns about the site. This site does incorporate quite a lot of impervious pavement where there is none currently. What we can promise with the site is that it, in terms of stormwater, it will not affect the water table because it infiltrates stormwater at about the rate that is currently infiltrating into the ground. In addition, the site is more environmentally friendly as proposed because we are discharging stormwater at a slower rate than is currently being discharged, protecting some downstream water resources. One other item I'd like to discuss is that in terms of driving around Hayward, I think it's certainly possible to dissuade those who are attending the church to take a left turn once they exit the church site onto Hamlet. We can certainly dissuade them from taking a left turn via signage or striping or a combination of the two.
Thank you. So, close the
Call for motions.
Okay. So it looks like we have, so on these items, I have three, do we vote them separately, correct?
We vote them separately. Before you call those, though, can we have a little more discussion?
Sure.
Do we need to close public hearing?
I will close the.
Jeff Benner, I'm a resident just north on Hamlet Avenue there on the north side of Stillwater Road. I'd just like the council to also look at potential traffic control issues as you come across the bridge going toward or eastbound on Stillwater Road. So as you come from Canvas and you come over the bridge, that intersection is already somewhat problematic with if you have anybody trying to make a turn there. We've got traffic that is using the right turn lane to pass cars that are waiting to make left turns, et cetera there. I just want the council to, when you look at this increase in traffic at that particular location, you're high on the bridge, and if you're not paying attention as people accelerate eastbound on Stillwater Road, as you come over that bridge, you kind of drop down and people can't see people at that intersection wanting to turn left or right. And I just would like the council to be aware that you may need to look at some type of traffic control modification at that intersection of Hamlet and Stillwater Road if you're looking at this amount of traffic increasing focused at 2 times during the week on Tuesdays and Sundays. But I'm just tossing it out there for something to think about. Thanks.
Thank you.
That does bring up a question. Has there been a traffic study done by the city engineer?
Yes, it has been.
Yes. Mr. Chair, I'll note too that, Stillwater Boulevard is a county road, and one of the conditions we did have was for the county to provide their comments. They've verbally provided them, but we haven't received those yet, so that could be something we can inquire about as well. And then I will note too, I think we caught it in the introductions, but Todd Blank from SEH is our consultant engineer for the city. He's a resource for you here tonight if you do have engineering-specific questions.
Thank you. I'll close the public portion of the hearing, correct? I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing, and then have discussion among the board members here.
So I guess just where my head is at right now on these 3 motions. The first motion is the CUP. I don't really have, I think the use is appropriate. I don't have any issues with that. The parking variance, I can't support that as it's written. I think one of the arguments here is that the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. And we're saying that it's a unique circumstance because there are no parking lots within 300 feet. That's not the intent of that plight. To me, a parking lot, being able to cross park is intended for something like the Waters and Hy-Vee. You're right next door. You're not having to cross any streets. You can just walk over. It's within 300 feet. It's not intended to be used for a parking lot that's a quarter mile down the road, that I have to have runners to someone's point, run across a highway and across a busy road. I think if the applicant can get some additional parking and we can reduce that gap, you know, I may be able to support a variance from the overall required parking count. But as written, I can't support that. As far as the site plan goes, your building materials, setbacks, design of the building, I have no issues there. I think there's a couple, an additional area that we need to deal with for foot candles on the north side of the site. We do exceed the half-foot candle in kind of the north, I guess, planned northwest corner of the building. So we just need to address that. Those are my comments.
What you just pointed to in your map is northeast, I think.
Planned northeast, or northwest.
I think that's the northeast, though.
It's plan northwest. Looking in plan view, northwest. It's cardinal, I don't know what the cardinal direction is, northeast?
Yeah, that's what I said, northeast, but okay. You're looking at it from the
In
paper. I'm
plan,
looking
yeah,
at it.
on the paper, in plan view, northwest.
Any other comments?
No, I'd have to look at that one. How high is the foot candles going at that point?
1.1, 0.8, 0.6, so just a little bit.
Yeah, that should be addressed because it does have to be below half a foot candle.
Right.
So that would be a point for you, that
I'm wondering if I could just ask a question of Commissioner Campbell. It sounds like we can find a place here that if I can increase the parking, not including canvas, and if I can slightly decrease the seating in the sanctuary, is there a number we can get to that will work for you?
I don't have a number in mind. I mean, I'm not.
Can I,
I'm not gonna tell you
may I suggest a number? Because I think I can kind of see where this number could go.
Okay.
I think that seating's not going to be 1,000. I think the number is really going to be about 970 to 980
That
seats.
gets you a lot closer
I
right there.
know, I'm working on it. And I also believe that I can get to about 230 parking places without going to Canvas Health. Now, that still doesn't get me quite to 4 seats per parking spot, but it gets me closer, and I'm just wondering if we could work that out right here, right now.
Well, just point of clarification. The application that's been made has been for a variance for off-premise parking, not a variance for the number of parking spaces. So I don't mean to be unduly bureaucratic, but you can't really approve that on the fly. There would need to be,
we don't
Okay.
negotiate anything here.
I hear you.
I think
In
you're- I think-
concept,
I
are
think
we-
in-
are we
I think
getting
in
there?
concept, for me, I can't speak for the rest of the commissioners. For me, I think you're heading in the right direction.
Is it possible we could make that a condition?
well, there's
Well,
certainly,
it's
the
still a-
planning commission is going to make a recommendation to the city council. They can include this discussion in their recommendation.
Uh-huh.
That they would essentially say that the planning commission would be supportive of a variance to reduce the number of required parking spaces, provided that the following steps were taken.
Well, what I'm hearing is the concern is crossing Stillwater Boulevard.
Yes.
And I think we could get to close to the number required without crossing without Canvas Health, without the help of Canvas Health. But I don't think we can get quite there. And I'm just looking for the sense of, in particular, Commissioner Campbell, who's brought this concern up,
If I may
as to,
clarify one thing, we recommend to the city council,
understood.
you make changes, you bring them to the city council, they will decide
Sure.
the absolute decision of what This is more of a discussion and recommendation area.
No, I appreciate that. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I have a good time doing my job. No, I want to get a sense of if we can find a consensus here that everybody can work with.
If I can chime in a little bit here. So we're talking on the merit of the document and what's presented to us,
Of course.
not on what could work, because we don't know what could work, because we're looking at what's submitted to us.
Certainly.
So if you can let us sort of discuss about what is presented,
Sure.
and if we're going to make any amendment to that, that would be sort of something you can do, and the city council can take it on.
Of course. No.
I think that'd be
We're
appreciated.
very happy to work with you to get to yes on this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, if I might just chime in here too. I mean, you do have the option tonight within where we are within the 60-day rule to table as well and bring back at another meeting. That's another option too, to have the applicant go back and revise something within the spirit of the input tonight on parking and size, and that gives Planning Commission the opportunity to say whether that's something that's reasonable and supportive when it goes to council the following meeting, which may be to the benefit of the applicant as well, to have potentially have a Planning Commission recommendation behind it. So I put that out there for consideration. I know oftentimes people are on schedules and things too, and the applicant may have an opinion on that, but there's nothing that forces you under state law to act tonight. And I look to John, if he's head nodding yes. I'm
There
not
would be time to
going too
notice
far.
a variance for the total number of parking spaces between now and the next commission meeting as well.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean, does the applicant have a timetable that they're working under?
While we're talking about parking, I got one more safety concern about parking.
Before you do that, though, we need to reopen the public hearing, to be honest.
Could we,
If you take this road, instead of going off the Stillwater Road this way, if you go this way and around and into Hayward and around, there's a lot of kids on my block and on that block, a lot of little kids on bicycles during the summer, every day, constantly riding around. If there's huge traffic going there, somebody's gonna get killed.
thank you. So I would like to sort of ask the board if they're open to laying this over, at least some items that of contention laid over till the next hearing.
Or would you rather just make the
No
motion?
urgency on my part, so.
Or would you rather just, when we make the motion for the variance part of it, just deny that part of it? So then it would go to the city council, and they would, if all of us are not in tune with it and say nay to it, then
I think-
the other
I
two
think-
motions
I think-
pass.
I'm
but the
sorry, I think
one-
it needs to go back to staff to negotiate with people, so we have to do a
Okay.
continuance.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly do that, I guess.
You know,
It may be to the applicant's best interest if they're picking up what's being put down up here to just pull this and
in one more month,
take it, yeah,
one
bring it,
more month on the deal.
fix your things and bring it back next month.
So we're talking the continuance of the entire,
Of the
Application.
Entire application,
Okay.
all the motions.
so I'm looking for a motion for that.
Okay, I will make a motion to recommend a table this discussion until next month.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right.
This item is laid over until next meeting. Next item would be going back to old business. I wasn't here, so I'm not gonna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a continuance.
Old business, public hearing, continuance, impact apartment, PUD, deviation, noise variance, preliminary plat, and site plan. So that was heard, right?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this is a continuation of the hearing that you heard at the last meeting in January. As you recall, The item was continued because we were waiting on a traffic study and also noise analysis from the property. The noise study and the traffic study have both been completed and submitted. Chuck Rickard is an engineer who, along with his team, did the traffic study. He's with WSB. He's here this evening, and I think it would be probably most effective if we have him present a summary of the traffic analysis that's been done in the area, identify specifically the work that they did related to this project, and the specific off-site improvements that they're recommending for this project. They also completed the noise analysis that was needed for the city to act on the noise variance. So I think it's the most effective and time-efficient way to proceed to have them do that presentation. The city's engineering consultant, Todd Blank, is here, who has also reviewed that and can give comments if you need it. And obviously, the project team members are here who have presented to you previously. So, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend focusing to begin with on the traffic study and then the noise. Have you asked us questions about those? And then if there's any subsequent questions about other aspects of the project, we would do that subsequently.
If you all agree, we can proceed.
Good with me.
Mr. Rickard?
Mr. Chair, as he's coming up, I'll just note that Chuck does represent the applicant in this case for the noise and traffic, but our city engineer has reviewed the work.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Chuck Rickard. I'm with WSB. We were, hired by the applicant to do this traffic study and the noise analysis for this project. I'm going to start with a little history. The initial traffic study was done back in 2018, for the BRT, the Gold Line BRT project. That study focused on the analysis and looking at this area and what the improvement should be, for the roadways based on that traffic generation from that area. It was split up into 3 areas. It looked at the park and ride lot and the station plaza, looked at the west side of Helmo and then the east side of Helmo. So, that study again recommended, improvements to the area, and that's what the Gold Line BRT kind of based a lot of their initial improvements for the area on, was that study. The current study, we updated that original study is what we did. We looked at that, what that study, had in it, the densities and so forth, and updated it. The 3 areas again that we looked at, the park and ride and the station plaza didn't change, so that we included that same traffic generation. The west side, that again didn't change, as far as the initial, framework plan that was looked at. So that stayed, and we didn't look at any additional traffic generation for that. However, the east side, with the 2 sites that are being proposed, the one site for the impact apartments that's in front of you tonight, and then the other site to the south, had increased density over what was in that original site, in the original plan. So that's what we focused on. We focused on those 2 sites, how that traffic generation added to the other generation that was already there, impacted the roadway system. We looked at, again, the first, we looked at the impact, the phase 1, we called it, of just the impact apartments. Again, that site that's on, the northern part of that east-west road, 2nd, street. And, that impact, we looked at the year 2024, which is the year that site would be developed. So we looked at that, came up, we did our analysis for that. We then looked at 2028, which was, again, one of the years that was in the original study. That was in the original study was the first year that was the full build of everything. So it included not only, this area, but it included the west side, the station and so forth. So everything was developed at that time based on that 2028 timeframe. And again, we looked at that 2028 timeframe. The south half of this development we assumed to be completed by the 2028 timeframe, and then the rest of the development would be included also. Then in 2040, we looked at that future, the full build of the area, including, other things in the whole, comprehensive plan, type development area. So those are the 3 years that we looked at. The traffic generation just from these 2 additional sites, increased by about 2,500 trips a day, was the additional, based on that additional density, 250 morning trips and about 230 evening trips. So that was the increase from that original study that was added to the site. That 2024 condition also assumed not only the development of the impact apartment site, but it included the Hudson Boulevard realignment. So, and a signal at Hudson, down where it will come in south of the site there. A new north-south street, the internal streets basically on the east side of Helmo. So the new north-south street that went from 4th down to the extension of Second Street or Second Street, that east-west street there. It also included some side street stop control. So the only signal that in 2024 was at the extension of Hudson. That was the only new signal. Otherwise, all the traffic control and roadways were the same as what they are today. In 2028, we then assumed the full build of the Gold Line improvements, which included some improvements to Helmo. It included a signal at 4th. It included the signal up at Hudson and 4th, up in that location also. And it included a few turn lanes along Helmo, not all the turn lanes that originally were looked at, but they did include some turn lanes. It also included the Helmo extension over 94 to Bielenberg. So that, the extension over 94 was included by 2028 also. And then in 2040, again, it was a full development of the area, including all those improvements. Bottom line, what we ended up with the recommendations of the study based on, looking at these analyses and looking at the improvements from the Gold Line is the Gold Line improvements, were, assumed as a recommendation. And then we also looked at the improvements to the west approach of 3rd, which is the street coming out from the site, between the 2 parcels that we're talking about, with a left turn lane and a through right turn lane on that approach. And then we also looked at some improvements at 4th and that new north-south street to the east of Helmo. So that new north-south street that went from 4th down to this east-west 2nd Street. We assumed some improvements up at that intersection. Again, a northbound right turn lane and an eastbound right turn lane and a westbound left turn lane was what we assumed for improvements at those intersections. There, in your staff report, there was a couple clarification questions that were identified, and I'll address those really quickly. The first one was with respect to, what was identified for that the improvements at 3rd and Helmo. And to clarify that, what's in the report, indicated 250 feet of left turn lane. And right turn lane at, for that intersection, which was a typo. It should have been 100 feet. And what happened there was one of our initial drafts of this report that we sent around to staff and Metro Transit and so forth to look at, we did not include the signals on Helmo at the other intersections. So once we included those signals on Helmo, that queue went way down and, provided gaps for traffic to get out at 3rd. So, that's the reason why that number, was incorrect in that report. So that's the clarification for that it's just the westbound approach that has improvements there. The second clarification was, again, with respect to that westbound, turn or the westbound turn lanes. And, again, it's correct in our original draft, we assumed a signal at 3rd actually, and not at 4th and Hudson. And we ended up with having a signal at 4th and Hudson and not a signal at 3rd, and, based on the gold line improvements. And then that's, just to clarify what was actually included in there. So those are my clarifications for that. So that was really quick. I went through that. If you have any questions on the traffic study, if, I can give you more details, whatever you need to hear. Otherwise, I can talk about the noise too, if you want me to talk about the noise.
Want to say anything about traffic?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, Chuck summarized the updated traffic study pretty well. The concerns that city staff had were just some clarification on where the improvements were being proposed and to make sure that they were consistent with the gold line proposed improvements on Helmo. So we have shared the updated study with the gold line staff, and the gold line staff and city staff are, it's acceptable now, and those conditions have been resolved. So we're in concurrence with the gold line. Thank you.
And just before we go on to the noise issue, I think it's important to recognize that we're not talking about noise emanating from this project. We're talking about noise that this property is subject to based upon highway noise. And so it's a little bit different than a noise variance for a user who's creating noise. This is a use that is being subjected to noise, so.
So again, the noise is based on MPCA guidelines. And those guidelines are based on what percentage of an hour, a certain noise level is reached. So they call L10, which is, 10% of the time, that level is reached on within an hour, and L50, which is 50% of the time. So those are the two standards that we're looking at, and it's based on use, land use. So a residential type land use in this case, and in the report you'll see what those levels are. It's, for the L50 it's 60, and for the L10, I can't remember off the top of my head what that was. But in any case, the 65 for the L10 and 60 for the L50. So what we based our analysis on is MnDOT recently did a noise study as part of the I-94 Metro, East Metro project that they're doing. So they did a noise study. They looked at a lot of receptors, along 94. Several of them were in the area of Helmo and, this area here. So one was actually right across the road from where this development's going to be, in the parking lot of, I forget the name of the business, right across the street there, but right in that parking lot is where that one receptor was. We use that as kind of our base, for looking at this. We then look, but unfortunately, those numbers are just based on what they call LEQ, because it's a federal project, it has to meet federal guidelines, which is a different standard. It's basically the average, over that hour versus the L10 or L50. So I looked at the LEQ, they call it. So in order to get to the L10 and L50, what we looked at was something called the flat earth, the MnDOT flat earth model. So what it does is you enter in the traffic, from these different roadways, the distances, and, it comes up with the L10 and L50 levels for you. And it also has the LEQs in there too. So what I did is I used those LEQs to compare to what, that receptor was to get our L10 and L50. So the results of that showed that the L10 exceeded the standards by 0.9 decibels in, the existing condition, and it's 2.3, or I'm sorry, the L50. By 0.9 in the existing conditions, and in the 2042 conditions, it exceeded it by about 2.3 decibels. 3 decibels is what you can perceive. So a 3 decibel change in volume is something a typical ear can perceive when you're looking or hearing, changes in noise levels. So it's below what really is going to be perceived over that standard. So we then looked at what some mitigation measures could be to block that noise. a noise wall, is obviously one. Unfortunately, on this site, there's no place for a noise wall. Plus, it's too far away from the freeway to really do any good for that. Plus, the city ordinance does not allow noise walls as part of a mitigation. So, that kind of threw that out. Other things are, looking at landscaping or berming, and you'd need such dense landscaping, about 100 feet thick of pine trees, to really, reduce that noise level to a point where it would be perceptible, that where you could hear a change in noise level. So that really wasn't practical. So we looked at several of these alternatives, none of which were practical. That's why we recommended the noise variances, because there really wasn't any mitigation that really fit, in this situation. So again, I went through that very quickly, but if you have any questions, I can try to answer them for you.
A question on your traffic
Yep.
projections and stuff. Most of what I could suss out of here had to do with development right around the general area there. Now, me personally, once that Bielenberg Bridge gets put in there, I'm using that as a shortcut to go to my favorite restaurant down there. And I'm assuming there's gonna be a lot of other people that are gonna be doing that too. How much has that been included in this study?
Good question. The traffic generation for those future years, even the 2024 and 2020, but especially 2028 and 2040, included what we call background traffic. Not just from the development area, but, other development. It looked at the comp plan numbers. It looked at, all the traffic, increases, on an average for that area. Then we added into this additional traffic generation. So that was accounted for in that initial study that was done, is what happens to that traffic, the increase of traffic on, Helmo in 2028 and beyond, once that's open, and that was included as part of that. So I couldn't tell you the exact number of what it was, but I could get it for you if you wanted, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Any question from the panel? Nope. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just give you a little bit more background. So again, this was continued at the last meeting, and as a result of that, we now have the traffic study, we now have the noise analysis. There have been a couple other changes to the plan since that time. One of those, at the request of city staff, was to relocate the entrance into the parking area in the impact department building to the south as opposed to the east. The unit count has increased from 258 to 321. And then there's some additional parking added in the temporary lot to the south. And I know that's a discussion item that the commission wants to have. So again, Mr. Chairman, this is a matter that requires 3 separate motions. One is for the preliminary plat. The second is for the site plan review for the 321 unit apartment development. And the third is for the noise variance. So you have 3 resolutions that have been prepared for you, each of which have separate conditions. And I think in the interest of time, I won't go through all of those conditions, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. I do know, just based upon short conversation we had at the beginning of the meeting, that there's some concern about minimum parking on the temporary parking lot to the south versus maximum. I would just repeat and encourage everybody to remember that that's an interim parking lot, that's a lot that's going to be there basically until that R6 parcel develops, in which case we'll be in a position to make a final determination about parking numbers. I think there's kind of 2 schools of thought on it. One, this is one of our most prominent transit-oriented development neighborhoods in the community. So the whole idea there is to reduce parking and reduce demand on parking. The other way of looking at that is potentially that because it's an interim parking lot, you'd have the opportunity to get a sense of how the neighborhood's functioning, how much parking is actually needed for the restaurant, and that would be kind of a living laboratory, if you will, to make the final determinations about parking to serve both R5 and R6. So I think Mr. Gitzloff, as a transit-oriented development specialist, and myself as someone who focuses on TOD, might err on the side of suggesting making the parking lot a little smaller, but we could certainly understand, and it really isn't something that is a permanent decision. So I just wanted to put that out in front of you. The other thing that's important to note is park dedication. This is a property and a project that is developing at nearly 3 times the maximum density allowed in the community. There's going to be a lot of people living in this area. And so we think it's important that there be appropriate park amenities to serve this neighborhood. And really, the determination of how that all gets sorted out has to be worked out with the overall surrounding property owners as well. The Skinnell folks who own the property and are selling the property to Norhart should be at the table for that. But you can see that there's calculations provided in the planning report based upon the city's current formula, the number of acres that would be required if they satisfied the park dedication requirement by land would be 12.5 acres. And then another half an acre to serve the commercial space for a total of 13 acres. I don't think that we want to see necessarily all of that in park, so there will need to be a determination about how much would be park land and what would be cash equivalent. So again, there's 3 separate actions, 3 separate resolutions. And the applicants are here to answer any questions you have about the project.
And
I do have a question. I don't know if you're going to do the same one, but your recommendation 9, back when we had this discussion last month, I wasn't able to be present, but I did send in some email that addressed this and was read into the record. I guess I don't understand why we adhere to a maximum. I understand the issue of wanting to move people to using the bus, but that isn't necessarily the way the residents of the apartment building are going to want to do it. And I don't understand a maximum of a parking lot. I understand minimum, which we do have and we discuss frequently, but the maximum's never really been in place. So I would move to strike recommendation 9 completely and consider a variance if we are required to do such.
I understand that point of view. I would say that many ordinances around the metropolitan area right now are including maximum numbers of parking spaces in order to encourage density and transit use. So again, I appreciate and respect your opinion.
I can probably comment to that one. So I am the zoning administrator for the city of St. Paul, and recently we just got rid of parking minimum, but we do have maximums, sort of to echo your words, to sort of increase density and ridership.
I just wanted to clarify something. The 320 odd units, it wasn't an increase from our last meeting. It was just a recalculation and a kind of an error. So
Yes.
nothing, the building didn't get bigger.
Didn't change the building, right?
I was just gonna, that's what I was wondering, why it went from that to 351. So how did that happen? So, okay.
Any questions to the applicants?
I think I have any for applicant, but I got a lot of questions for staff.
You do?
I spent time last night making lots of notes. I'm ready to go here.
Okay,
So if you don't mind, I'll just jump into them.
go ahead.
I think our math on the park dedication is wrong. So we need to check the commercial piece, because I actually think if my math is correct, it's only 0.05 acres that are required to be dedicated, not a half an acre. So I saved you a little money, I think. So, and you'll forgive me, some of these questions are just ignorant questions because I've not developed in Minnesota, but I've done a lot of development out west. I think one of the things I saw in here is that outlots A and B, we're asking for those to be combined and then dedicated to the city. So will the city maintain the applicant's stormwater? Is that the intent?
Want to take that, Todd?
The recommendation is that those 2 outlots be combined and then deeded to the city. And those are public stormwater ponds, so the maintenance would be by the city.
Okay. And that's customary that we have, that the city takes that on, or is that just because of this is a kind of a master development?
Yes, if they were serving just private development, then the property owner would take care of it, but since it drains public right-of-way, then it becomes a public drainage.
And does the applicant have, I mean, is there a special assessment or anything that they pay to help offset the city's costs to maintain that? Because obviously, we wouldn't need a pond as large if we were just maintaining the right-of-way.
Right, they are subject to the stormwater utility fee, like other property owners, and the higher densities pay more fees for that, and that's part of what that money is used for.
Okay.
Why don't you stay here?
Similarly, like I had a question on all of those right-of-way improvements. On all of my projects, I have to build right-of-way improvements, even though I'm a private developer. Similarly, is it customary that we as the city take that on and the applicant doesn't have to contribute to those?
I have not been involved with that part and that discussion, so I honestly don't know the proposed financing for the public improvements. Typically, the city has a share and the property owners have a share based on the benefit to the property, so I don't know what the answer is here, but it's typical that property owners that benefit pay a portion of the cost.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, one of the things that'll get done is the development agreement, and that's where all those things get negotiated. But the general understanding is the roadway improvements will be paid for by the developer as part of this project. And then there's always the proverbial, the horse trading that goes on to get these deals done afterwards. And there's a lot that will need to get worked out on this
And
one.
the park dedication issue would be resolved ultimately in that
Yes.
as well.
Yep, that's another one to throw in the mix.
And so that was a question that I had. So as I read our code, it looks like we as a city get to decide how we split that up. I mean, the way it's written, it should all be land, but we as a city get to decide, we don't want it all as land. We want
It's
some
at the
as
city's
cash.
discretion whether you take land or cash in lieu of land.
Okay, and that's why we're asking that we split this up.
That's pretty typical in all municipalities, I would say. Simple, same way.
Item 4, exterior building materials. We're asking them to go to 70% Class 1. I think that's fine. I was just curious what percentage it is now.
The first floor is right now Class 1.
Mr. Salt, why don't you come to the dais?
Microphone.
Just like last time when we brought in those Class 2 material samples, we only planned on doing the first floor as Class 1, and all the floors above that were going to be the Class 2 material. So that's probably maybe 15% Class 1, just for the first floor level, and also the storefront along the two-story storefront, that's Class 1 because it's mostly glazing. But everything above that, we do wish to use the Class 2.
So I think if I remember correctly, I'm generally in favor of that myself. I think it's important that at that pedestrian level, we have the Class 1. Maybe you push it up a little bit and you start flirting with that second floor, but I think in a building like this, I don't know that 70% makes a lot of sense, because then you're getting up to the 5th floor with Class 1 materials that nobody can touch, feel, interact with, and you're spending money that I don't think you're getting your bang for your buck.
Our finishes are meant to imitate the Class 1 as much as we possibly can, and I'm going to strive to make it look identical to the material that would be considered Class 1. So we're not trying to degrade the look, per se. We want to keep the look as upscale as we can get it. It's just we're trying to use a less costly material to obtain the same value and its a presence. So we're okay with using it, mostly Helmo side. Being the two-story glass, that's where you see most of that. There's a lot of Class 1 material. And of course, the first floor all the way around is still Class 1. So we think above that, we can still make it look really, really good without using the very expensive material that would cost a fortune to do on such a large building.
Thank you. So one other area that I just had a question on for staff. Oakdale Fire looks like they say that they need new high-rise firefighting equipment and training to serve this building. Do we not have impact fees that would offset that? And if not, how does the applicant find out what the cost of this is, or are they just signing a blank check?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, this is something we'll get some more, put a dollar amount towards that. So it's not a new fire truck. I think that's a clarification to make. It's specialized equipment and training. So once your buildings get above a certain height, ladders aren't really, effective at that point. It's more of the sprinkler system and those sort of things. So we can delve a little bit more deeper into that one and what that condition looks like, and what we're, what's really within our discretion to ask for.
I think that's all I have for now. I'm sure I'll come up with more.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I think we should probably move to the motions. We have 3 motions here. So the first being the noise. I'm looking for,
I will make a motion to recommend approval for the requested noise variance. If that's the one.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The second one is the preliminary plat. Looking for motion, that
I
one.
will make a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat for the Helmo Station subject to conditions.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I will
And-
make a motion to recommend approval of the PUD deviations and site plan for the impact apartments, subject to conditions.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. That'll bring us to the next item, which is the EV Ready Ordinance.
Shannon, do you want to come here? You want to come here, or you can come to one?
I'm right here. Yeah, no worries. Chair and Commission, thank you for having me back. Just as a reminder, my name is Shannon Reidlinger. I am a Senior Community Development Specialist here at the City of Oakdale. And last time we talked, I was here to present you with some draft language for our EV Ready Ordinance amendments. That language was samples from different ordinances from across Minnesota and the country. And after hearing some feedback at that Planning Commission meeting, I went and did some work to create a draft for our own code of ordinances. That work included looking at a number of different Minnesotan cities to understand what their ordinance amendment language looks like when it comes to electric vehicles. And it also was looking at national best practices as far as parking and EV ready stall requirements and standards that have been proposed at the national level. So that research on my part led to the draft that you see before you. There is a number of smaller ordinance amendment updates, as well as a infrastructure design and guideline recommendation document. I think that's a little bit different than what we have been discussing at the last conversation. The last conversation was very much about what we need to do to amend the ordinance itself. What I'm presenting to you today, has a little bit of ordinance amendments, but it's also recommending a best practice document that will actually be separate from the Code of Ordinances itself. The draft here has been put forward to Oakdale's Environmental Management Commission for consideration and feedback, and it's also been put in front of some of our internal city staff, again, for consideration and feedback. So it's been vetted by a couple of different eyes before it has landed in front of you today. And before I open the floor for any discussion of both the ordinance amendments and the guideline document itself, I wanted to point out on the first page of the memo, there are a couple of bullet points that detail some bits of feedback and concern that the Planning Commission had for me the last time that I came to talk to you about this. And so I wanted to address those bullet points again before opening it up to the floor for a little bit more discussion. The first one, the Commission had some concern about flexibility in charging station design and parking standards. That one bullet point is really kind of the impetus for removing some of the proposed language out of the ordinance amendments themselves and putting it into a separate guideline document. Right now, because we're really not we're not requiring a lot when it comes to charging capacity for businesses and multi-residential apartments. Because it's not a requirement, it's more of a recommendation, I felt that it was more appropriate to put all of those recommendations into a guideline document as opposed to putting them into the ordinance themselves. So that kind of allows for a little bit more flexibility for installers. The second bullet point has to do with specification for residential charging options in single-family homes versus multifamily. In my research, there wasn't a lot of precedent when it comes to making requirements of single-family home charging. I think that has to do with the fact that it's more for private use and less for public use. So the recommendation, the installation document itself really gets more at multifamily residential and commercial installation. Not as much towards private because there's more opportunity for those charging stations to be used by the public. I will also say that the fourth bullet point here about standards, whether or not they're different between parking lots and parking garages, that's pretty similar to the lack of precedent for any ordinance amendments around residential parking. There's just not a whole lot of difference between, as far as I can tell, between recommendations for parking lots versus garages. You will see in the guideline document that there is a suggestion for the charging stations themselves to be installed either in an island, mounted on a wall, or potentially protected by some bollards if they're going to be just on the curb. And that location recommendation could vary depending on whether or not an installer is in a parking lot versus a garage. But again, it's kind of up to the installer themselves, the way that things are written right now. The third bullet point about ordinance language and whether or not we can get this to comply with standards we already have. Again, having this be separate from the ordinance itself adds in that degree of flexibility, so there's less of a requirement to be complicit to the letter of the ordinance itself. There was some concern about fire code regulations and whether the infrastructure would allow for this. I did talk with our building inspection department, and they mentioned that any charging station that's installed will have to have a permit pulled for electric. All of those, the way that the draft is written right now, it requires in the code that any installed charging station comply with state building and electric codes. So that does help kind of reinforce the fact that these need to be safely installed charging stations. Last two bullet points here, the equitable distribution of standard parking spaces. That is something that I felt was appropriate to leave up to the installer themselves. So the installer can choose where they would like to place the charging stations, whether or not they would like to place them closer to a building to make it sort of encourage the use of electric vehicles or have them further away. That will again be up to the installer themselves. And then the last bullet point here, there was some concern about whether or not we could incentivize the installation of charging stations through the ordinances themselves. The way that the ordinance is, or the draft language is written right now really allows a lot of flexibility for the installer themselves to make choices here. I think that trying to think through incentivizing charging station installations is sort of a next phase of becoming an EV-ready community and something that I am definitely going to be looking into a little bit further. But right now, I have not drafted any language that really does get at that incentivization for installers at the moment. I'm assuming that you've all you had the chance to read all of this before now, so I don't want to burden you with too much more conversation about the actual draft language itself, but I am more than willing to take any questions or field any feedback that you may have for me.
Any questions that the board may have?
I've only got a couple, but I think we did talk about it in the same last time. Basically, in your guideline document, Part A8, just as a naive analysis of it, do 10 installs, an arbitrary count, that's going to potentially increase the current draw to by another 400 amps. So depending on how many you put in an apartment or whatever, or in a business, that could be a major upgrade to their electrical potentially. Because I'm not sure what the transformer's overhead is on a residential block or in a commercial block. So that's just a point for you to consider in there. It does add a huge amount of current draw, but it may be outside the scope of your document anyway.
Yeah.
And I would add, I think, though, that on most of these larger projects like impact apartments, they're not tapping into an existing
all new.
transformer.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all new, so they're gonna size it to the, however many they
Excel
have.
has to size it, actually. And then on, I guess it's C3A, between that and in the code document, the 17B for electrical charges stage, installation of an EVCS shall not reduce the overall minimum parking space area dimensions below those required. I'm not sure if that's actually playing into this or not, but in your design document, it says any accessible EVCS should not count towards the minimum number of accessible car and van parking spaces required in a parking facility. So if they take away some, if they're being installed as an aftermarket thing, they're gonna take away parking spaces, we may actually reduce somebody's parking to below the minimum required, which is a concern for me.
Yeah, so to clarify, the amendment to Article 18, Section B here about how EVCS shall not reduce the overall minimum parking space area dimensions. So that has to get at the idea that there is a minimum space that the stall has to be. And if you wanted to include a charging station, that couldn't impede that minimum space itself. So that has more to do with just the dimensions of the parking stall.
I reread it, I noticed that, yes.
Yep.
Okay. But the other one does present a concern to me that we may inadvertently make somebody non-compliant on their parking spaces if we follow the letter of that.
I had a question on all of these accessory uses. I'm curious how we handled the EV stations at Hy-Vee. Are those treated as accessory? Because this doesn't, to me, it just doesn't seem like an accessory use. It's just electric charging station. So, was curious about that. And then Article 18, Section 25, 161, 17A. To me, that reads as required. You know, electric vehicle charging infrastructure shall be installed in compliance with state building and electrical code. And I understand that you're saying if you install it, it has to be to code. But as I read that, my interpretation is that I have to install electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. Instead of, if installed, EVCE needs to meet code, something like that.
I'm missing.
Shannon, you want me to address the Hy-Vee piece of it?
Yeah, that would be great because I don't know.
Yeah, I think the intent behind this is, when the code was drafted or even PUD ordinances, we didn't really thinking about electric vehicle charging. It does seem to fit into something we'd want to look at as an accessory use and define in our zoning code. Then it really has a home base in there per se. We're saying that if somebody comes to us, they want to put an EV and we're not going scratching our heads, is this allowed or not? Yeah, it's an accessory use, it's allowed. There are some basic standards about complying with electric and building code, and then could also say, and then here are our guidelines too that are part of that. So that it does give a landing spot for the EV charging by defining it as an allowable accessory use in the districts.
Fair enough.
And actually, the use of the word accessory kind of clarifies 17A, the shall.
Yeah.
There'd be competition otherwise.
So we need to take no action on this, correct?
No, not currently. This is just to present you with the most updated draft language. I believe that the next action would be to bring it back for a public hearing.
And my congratulations. You took what I thought was kind of unwieldy on the first pass. This is much, much improved.
Good. Yeah. Yeah, my goal was to have it be relatively in line with what other cities are doing, but not be the most built out. So we're kind of squarely in the middle of some of these other cities that are included in the memo.
I think you're getting there. It's
Good.
good, yeah. In St. Paul, we just had one with the Fort site. That's our first EV ordinance there. So that's still has some improvement to make, so. Yeah.
This one more left, the temporary patio.
Okay.
There's one more.
Yep, that's it. Signaling me that we gotta keep things moving.
Thank you all.
The next one, the temporary patio ordinance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll handle this one. This is actually an item that came before the Planning Commission last summer. During the height of the pandemic, the city did allow some temporary outdoor patios, mostly associated with bars and restaurants that are also, serving alcohol, either in a public sidewalk or in a parking lot. This was big during the height of the pandemic, when, if you couldn't dine inside or restrictions. We are still seeing this as a desired use out there to this year going forward. So I think we're still in this transitional period where, even though the governor's order is gone, there's still people that are uncomfortable with being indoors, and expect that to continue for a while. So this was when we took this, we got some feedback from Planning Commission last time around. It was revised, it went to council. Council last year said, it was already getting late in the year, said, well, let's look at this again in 2022 if there's interest again. We did get one inquiry, and brought it back to council. I had our intern ask around. He just made some calls and asked a few businesses if they'd be interested in this, and now our number's up to 4 potential businesses that would be interested for this upcoming year, as an option to have the temporary outdoor patio ordinance. Staff is proposing it for that reason as a demonstration for 2022. That gives it us the chance to kind of see how popular it is, how well it works, monitor it, and then, is this something that, is more permanent? Is there value for it beyond just, a pandemic-related decision? So, not to go into a ton of the detail, I think some of the other things we're working out is what the license fee should be. Council wanted to make sure that, we originally said 400 because that's what a garden center charges. But we started talking to other cities, and a lot of them aren't charging, or charging a lower amount, because they're more interested in just making sure that they're tracking and they're aware of those, and they're an opportunity to review for egress and things like that. And most of the businesses that are going to be applying for this already have a liquor license, so they've already gone through a process once. So we're going to go back to council and recommend a reduced fee of between $100 and $200 for that. I guess the only other things, for Planning Commission here tonight, I'd be happy to take any feedback. I'll provide it verbally at a workshop to council next Tuesday. As far as anything we hear here tonight, and it'll be up to, to council whether they want to, go forward with this again this year. A couple other comments that they had too were, making sure that as part of the application, we're asking about materials that would be used for any sort of fencing or enclosure. There's a difference in things with barricades versus, fencing and things like that. So the license process gives an opportunity for staff and potentially council to review it beforehand. Yeah, that's kind of the key of it. I can conclude there and just take any questions, knowing it's getting a little late here.
We have nothing here concerning, setting size limits or anything like that. It's just kind of, you fill out the application, put what you want, and it's up to the discretion of staff to decide if it's appropriate.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Campbell, right now, we're going to ask that with council if they want, what they want as staff discretion, or whether it goes back to council for final approval. The big thing is reviewing, egress, ingress, and, making sure that there's a separate entrance if there's liquor served in compliance with the liquor license noise ordinance as well. ensuring compliance with the noise ordinance. So it's pretty, yeah, it's a pretty straightforward type of review. And it is we're setting this up as a license, so that would go through our city clerk's office, not the community development department office, and it would be, we're not amending the zoning code. So that's why we're really looking for input, because the public hearing would be held at the council.
I have a couple of other questions. I did visit a couple of restaurants that I go to, and I asked them if the $400 fee would be, I recognize you say you're going to lower it, but I just said, would this be a make or break? And he says, yeah, it'd probably break. I wouldn't do it for at 400. Just as a side comment. And the other thing is, in my discussion with them, they weren't clear on whether or not their existing patio would fall under this. And your language does say that, but you might want to add existing patios are excluded. They're not part of this temporary structure thing, especially if they're not even serving alcohol. But because they were confused as I was asking the questions about it.
Good feedback.
I guess I would counter that. I mean, I'm not a restaurateur in this city, but I think it's appropriate that we have a fee. The investment that they will have to make to build out this outdoor patio with fencing and tables and whatever other accoutrements they might have will likely far exceed 400. So if you were to keep it there, I think if any potential applicant couldn't pay the 400, I'd have a greater concern about the business overall, and how are you gonna fund a patio if you can't pay that? But
Well, in particular, the one I went to, their temporary structure before was 3 tables.
yeah,
So the payback just isn't there necessarily.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, any more questions?
So do you need a motion on this too? If there's, it says at the
well,
bottom, there is a motion
You know,
for it, but-
take one if you want to.
Well,
That's what I'll put it
that just
on.
makes
It's not
go
a,
to city council at that
it'll go
point.
to city council. We could relay that
We make a
motion.
motion and then it'll go to city council. If we don't, you're still gonna go to city council.
Yeah.
So why don't we just, we're okay with it.
Okay, looking for a motion here.
Oh, all right. Well, motion to recommend approval of the city code amendment creating a temporary outdoor patio license for 2022.
Second.
Second. Well, he said.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. I apologize. So we have somebody in the audience here that hasn't been given the floor. Why don't you please come up? Sorry.
I know I did.
We made you wait all this
I
time.
I know. I
It's gotta
know.
be exciting now.
I'll try to make this quick. It's been 2 late nights for me, you guys, and Andy. We've been here last night, it was a long one, and tonight's been a long one, so, yeah.
Getting their bang for their buck.
Yeah, so, anyway, just, I'll make it quick, just a few things. We have Summerfest going on, end of June, yay. Yeah, there is the parade, and then the fireworks are gonna be bigger and better this year. So make sure you come Saturday night to see the fireworks. That'll be good, you guys. If you haven't seen it, I want to recommend to watch the Oakdale update that Frank did with Mayor Ranke on all the things that are going on in Oakdale. If you go to the Oakdale Facebook webpage, there is a link to it, and you can also just Google it. But they did a nice interview with all the good things that are going on in Oakdale. So I just would recommend it. And also I want to welcome back Lori Popovic. She came back. She's staff as the communications manager. So yay, she started March 1st. So we want to welcome her back. Okay? And if you have any other questions, I'll take them.
was no question.
I think we all want to go. So you guys did a nice job tonight, okay? Thank you.
So this concludes our meeting for today. And I'm going to ask for more.
I have no updates.
Sorry.
I have no updates.
Keep on going then.
Community development update. I thought it's.
You've had enough updates.
Okay, all right.
This is the center of the activity right now in the city, and honestly, it is.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
Nothing?
so you can adjourn.
Okay. So this concludes our meeting for March 3rd, 2022. And do I ask for motion to adjourn? I suppose. Okay, I will ask for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.